There is a reason some people break from a single insult, while others remain calm in the middle of chaos. There is a reason some people lose themselves after rejection, betrayal, or failure, while others walk through pain without letting it destroy their identity. And the difference is not luck, it is not talent, it is not intelligence, it is something far more dangerous. It is mental discipline. Most people spend their entire lives believing the enemy is outside of them. Toxic people stress failure, criticism. But what if I told you the real prison is not your circumstances, it is your inability to control your own mind? Because the moment someone can control your emotions, they control your life. If one opinion ruins your peace, if one rejection destroys your confidence, if one difficult moment changes your entire mood, then your inner world is no longer yours. It belongs to everything around you, and that is exactly why you need to hear this speech until the very end. Because today, you are about to understand 10 Stoic principles that can completely change the way you think, react, suffer, and live. These are not motivational cliches. These are psychological weapons that have helped powerful minds remain calm through betrayal, humiliation, uncertainty, loss, and pain for centuries. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people are too emotionally addicted to chaos to apply these lessons. They say they want peace, but they continue feeding the habits that destroy it. They say they want strength, but they avoid discomfort at all costs. So while you listen to this, do not just hear the words. Observe yourself. Because somewhere in this speech, you are going to meet the version of yourself that has been silently controlling your life for years. And once you see it clearly, you will never think the same way again. There is a silent addiction that controls most people, and almost nobody talks about it honestly. It is not addiction to money, pleasure, or success. It is addiction to approval, the need to be accepted, the need to be understood, the need to feel emotionally safe through the eyes of other people. And the terrifying part is that many people build their entire identity around this without ever realizing it. You see it everywhere. Someone posts a thought online and checks their phone every few minutes to see who validated it. Someone changes their personality depending on who they are around. Someone stays in relationships that slowly destroy their spirit simply because rejection feels more painful than self-betrayal. And over time, they lose all connection to who they really are. Because when your worth depends on external approval, you stop living from authenticity and start living from performance. This is why so many people feel exhausted. They are not only carrying their own emotions, they are carrying the psychological burden of trying to manage everybody else's perception of them. They replay conversations at night, they over-explain themselves. They become emotionally disturbed by misunderstanding because somewhere deep inside, they believe being misunderstood means being unworthy. But it does not. One of the hardest truths to accept is that people do not see you objectively. They see you through the lens of their own experiences, fears, insecurities, expectations, and emotional history. Two people can meet the exact same version of you and walk away with completely different opinions. One may see strength where another sees arrogance. One may see confidence where another sees threat. One may see honesty where another sees rebellion. And if your emotional stability depends on controlling those interpretations, you will spend your entire life emotionally imprisoned. The Stoics understood something profound about human psychology. They understood that suffering increases the moment you try to control what was never yours to control. And other people's opinions have never belonged to you. Think about how much energy people waste trying to be liked by everyone. They filter their words carefully, they suppress their truth, they abandon their boundaries, they tolerate disrespect. They become smaller, quieter, softer versions of themselves just to avoid discomfort, but eventually a painful realization arrives. Even after all that self-abandonment, they are still criticized, still misunderstood, still rejected by someone. Because no human being escapes judgment, and once you truly understand this, something liberating happens inside you. You stop treating criticism like a threat to your identity. You stop collapsing every time someone fails to validate your value. You begin to realize that peace comes from self-respect, not universal approval. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionally disconnected. It means developing an internal center strong enough that you no longer need constant reassurance to feel worthy. There is a difference between enjoying appreciation and depending on it psychologically. One is healthy. The other is emotional dependency disguised as confidence. And many people who appear confident are deeply fragile underneath. Their confidence survives only as long as they are admired. The moment criticism enters the room, they emotionally unravel. That is not confidence. That is emotional exposure. Real confidence is quieter than that. It is the ability to remain grounded when praise disappears. It is the ability to hear criticism without instantly questioning your entire identity. It is the ability to walk away from environments where you must constantly prove your worth just to feel accepted. Because the truth is, if someone only values you when you perform, obey, or shrink yourself for their comfort, they are not connected to your authentic self. They are connected to the version of you that benefits them emotionally. And this is where many people lose themselves. They become addicted to maintaining versions of themselves that receive approval, even if those versions are destroying them internally. They smile when they want to speak. They stay silent when they want to leave. They seek permission to exist fully. But a Stoic mindset changes this entirely. You begin to understand that your value does not increase when someone praises you, and it does not decrease when someone rejects you. Your worth cannot be negotiated by public opinion. The moment you internalize this, you become emotionally dangerous in the most powerful sense. Because now manipulation becomes less effective, fear becomes weaker, rejection loses its ability to control your behavior. And suddenly, you no longer need to chase respect desperately, because you have built it within yourself. That is the paradox most people never understand. The more desperately you seek validation, the weaker your presence becomes. But the moment you stop needing approval to feel complete, your entire energy changes. Your words become more honest. Your boundaries become clearer. Your decisions become calmer. You stop performing and start existing truthfully. And perhaps that is real freedom, to stand in a room where not everyone understands you, and still remain deeply at peace with yourself. Because the strongest mind is not the one admired by everyone, it is the one no longer controlled by anyone. Most people believe their greatest enemy is the outside world, difficult people, rejection, failure, stress, betrayal, but if you observe carefully, you begin to notice something deeper. Two people can experience the exact same event, and one collapses while the other remains calm. One becomes consumed by anger while the other responds with clarity. One allows pain to destroy them while the other transforms through it. So the real question is not what happened to them. The real question is how they interpreted what happened. This is where Stoicism becomes incredibly powerful, because it forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. Your emotions are real, but they are not always reliable. And most people spend their entire lives obeying emotions without ever questioning them. They assume that because they feel something intensely, it must automatically be true. But emotions are often reactions shaped by fear, memory, insecurity, ego, and past wounds. They are signals, not commands. And yet modern culture teaches people the opposite. It encourages impulsive expression without reflection. If you feel angry, explode. If you feel offended, attack. If you feel fear, retreat. If you feel sadness, surrender your entire identity to it. People are taught to worship emotional intensity as authenticity, but emotional honesty without emotional discipline becomes destruction. The Stoics understood that the highest form of power is not controlling others. It is controlling yourself in moments when your emotions desperately want to control you. Think about how many lives are ruined not by circumstances, but by reactions. A moment of anger destroys a relationship. A moment of insecurity creates years of self-doubt. A moment of fear prevents someone from pursuing the life they truly want. Human beings often do not suffer because of reality itself. They suffer because they react unconsciously to reality. And unconscious reactions are dangerous because they feel justified in the moment. That is why emotional mastery begins with awareness. The ability to pause and observe yourself while the emotion is happening, to sit inside anger without immediately expressing it, to experience disappointment without creating a personal tragedy around it, to feel fear without allowing it to make decisions for your future. This pause changes everything, because in that pause you separate yourself from the emotion. You stop becoming the emotion and instead begin observing it. And the moment you can observe something, you are no longer completely controlled by it. Most people never develop this ability. They become fused with every emotional state that enters them. If they feel rejected, they become rejection. If they feel anxious, they become anxiety. If they feel hurt, they immediately create stories about abandonment, worthlessness, or failure. Their emotions do not simply pass through them. Their emotions define them. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. It teaches that emotions are temporary internal experiences, not permanent identities. You are not your anger. You are not your sadness. You are not your fear. You are the awareness capable of choosing what happens next. And this distinction is life-changing, because when you stop obeying every emotion automatically, you reclaim authority over your life. Suddenly, another person's behavior no longer controls your peace so easily. Criticism loses some of its power. Delays become tolerable. Conflict becomes manageable. You stop reacting impulsively to temporary emotional storms. And perhaps most importantly, you stop fearing your own emotions. Many people are terrified of discomfort. They avoid silence because silence exposes unresolved feelings. They distract themselves constantly because they cannot tolerate sitting with uncertainty, loneliness, or pain. But avoidance strengthens emotional weakness. Every time you run from discomfort, you teach your mind that discomfort is dangerous. The Stoics practiced the opposite. They trained themselves to face discomfort consciously. Not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they understood that resilience is built through exposure, not avoidance. And this is something psychologically profound. Emotional strength is not the absence of emotion. It is the capacity to remain stable while emotions move through you. There is a huge difference. A person who suppresses emotion becomes emotionally numb. But a person who masters emotion becomes emotionally intelligent. They can feel deeply without becoming chaotic. They can experience pain without losing dignity. They can remain calm in situations that would emotionally dominate most people. And this calmness is often misunderstood. People assume calm individuals feel less. In reality, they often feel more. The difference is that they have developed enough self-awareness not to let every feeling dictate their behavior. That is true maturity, because adulthood is not measured by age. It is measured by how much responsibility you take for your internal world. And if you think about it, this is where freedom actually begins, not when life becomes perfect, but when your inner state is no longer dependent on external conditions. When somebody's disrespect no longer ruins your entire day, when setbacks no longer convince you to quit, when temporary emotions no longer control permanent decisions, that is power. And the irony is that most people spend years trying to control other people because they cannot control themselves. They want to control opinions, outcomes, relationships, and circumstances, but the Stoic understands that external control is fragile. Inner control is lasting, because life will always remain unpredictable. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will change. Emotions will rise unexpectedly. But if you can learn to pause before reacting, if you can learn to observe your emotions without becoming enslaved by them, then something extraordinary happens. You become emotionally unshakable, not because you stopped feeling, but because you finally stopped surrendering your mind to every feeling that passes through you. One of the greatest illusions people carry through life is the belief that peace will come when life finally becomes fair. When people finally treat them correctly, when success finally arrives, when pain finally disappears. So they spend years emotionally negotiating with reality, arguing internally with everything they cannot control. They resist change, they resist discomfort, they resist loss, and without realizing it, this resistance becomes the source of their suffering. Because life does not ask for your permission before it changes. People leave, circumstances collapse, plans fail, aging happens, loss arrives unexpectedly, and the human mind struggles with this because it craves certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants permanence in a world that was never designed to be permanent. But Stoicism forces you to confront reality directly instead of emotionally escaping from it. It teaches that strength begins the moment you stop demanding that life behave according to your expectations. This does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming psychologically flexible enough to face reality without collapsing every time reality disappoints you. Most people are emotionally fragile because they are attached not only to outcomes, but to how they imagined life was supposed to happen. They suffer twice, first from the pain itself, and then from the refusal to accept the pain, and often the second suffering is greater than the first. Think about how many people remain trapped in bitterness because life did not unfold according to their plans. They replay the same disappointments for years. They become emotionally anchored to moments they cannot change. And slowly their identity becomes organized around resentment. But the Stoics understood something deeply liberating. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is clarity. It is the ability to look directly at reality without emotional distortion. To say, this is what happened, this is difficult, this is painful, but I will not destroy myself resisting what already exists. That mindset changes everything. Because once you stop wasting energy arguing with reality, you can finally use your energy to respond intelligently to it. And this is where discipline enters the conversation. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment or restriction, but psychologically, discipline is actually self-respect in action. It is the ability to act according to values instead of temporary moods. And this is rare because most people are controlled by impulses they do not even notice. They eat to escape emotions. They distract themselves to avoid silence. They procrastinate because discomfort feels unbearable. They abandon routines the moment motivation disappears. In other words, they become servants to emotional convenience. But emotional convenience is dangerous because it slowly weakens your ability to endure discomfort. And a person who cannot tolerate discomfort becomes fragile in every area of life, fragile in relationships, fragile in ambition, fragile in adversity, fragile in loneliness. The Stoics trained themselves differently. They intentionally practiced discipline because they understood something most people avoid admitting. Freedom without self-control becomes self-destruction. Look carefully at modern life. Many people believe freedom means doing whatever they feel in the moment. But if a person cannot control their anger, impulses, cravings, attention, or habits, are they truly free? Or are they simply being controlled by different forces from within? Real freedom is internal. It is waking up and keeping promises to yourself even when you do not feel motivated. It is maintaining dignity during emotional storms. It is choosing long-term peace over short-term relief. It is having enough mastery over yourself that temporary emotions no longer dictate permanent consequences. And this requires discipline not only physically but mentally. Mental discipline means protecting your attention from chaos. It means being selective about what enters your mind, because your mind absorbs everything repeatedly exposed to it. Fear, negativity, outrage, comparison, noise, over time, these things shape your emotional state without you realizing it. That is why many people feel mentally exhausted even when nothing catastrophic has happened. Their nervous system never rests. Their mind is constantly overstimulated. They consume endless distraction because silence feels uncomfortable. But silence feels uncomfortable only when you are disconnected from yourself. The Stoics valued solitude because solitude reveals truth. In silence, you discover what controls you. You discover your fears, your attachments, your emotional dependencies. And most importantly, you discover whether you can remain at peace without constant stimulation. That is a form of strength very few people develop. And perhaps this is the deeper lesson beneath Stoic discipline. Discipline is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming stable. It is about creating an inner foundation strong enough that external chaos does not immediately destroy your peace. Because life will continue testing you. There will always be uncertainty, always disappointment, always unpredictability. But if your emotional state depends entirely on circumstances being perfect, then your peace will always remain fragile. The Stoic understands that inner stability must be built intentionally, day by day, thought by thought, habit by habit. And eventually, something powerful begins to happen. You stop panicking over temporary setbacks. You stop needing immediate comfort. You stop reacting impulsively to every inconvenience. You become calmer, clearer, more grounded. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger than your previous self. And that is the transformation most people are secretly searching for. Not a perfect life, but a mind that remains steady even when life is not.